Good evening, everyone. We are here for this week 9 course of medicinal chemistry, which is a NPTEL platform course running on NPTEL platform, and the course instructors are Professor Harina Chakrapani from ISER Pune, and I am Simran, your PMRF teaching assistant from IIT Bombay. So this is week 9 of this course. The video lectures are uploaded on the YouTube channel, and as well as you have those tutorial lectures of Harina Chakrapani uploaded on NPTEL platform. I hope you guys have gone through the video tutorial of that. So first of all, this is some standing instruction for this tutorial. So this is a problem solving session, and which will be held on every Saturday 5 to 7 p.m. and the platform is Google Meet. So this is the link which we have shared to all the students, and every week we will be meeting on this Google Meet platform. In case of any network disruption, please wait and do not leave. I'll join again, and please ask your queries in the chat box or raise your hand so that there is no ambiguity or there is no problem in asking questions for this lecture. Then the slides will be shared with you guys soon, and you can see the recording of this session as well as all the 8 sessions which we have taken till now on YouTube channel, which is Simran NPTEL DA. This is my YouTube channel on which you can find my videos related to this course. And please make sure to attend every tutorial to understand the course better, because if you gone through all the lectures video, so you will see that after seeing all of them, only you will understand what I am going to teach in next class. So make sure you attend, or if you are not able to attend any of the session, make sure to see at least a recording of the session which I have uploaded on the YouTube channel. So these are some instructions. So this is week 9. So we will be talking about optimizing access to the target, prodrugs, prodrugs and drug alliances, endogenous compounds, pep- peptidomimetics, and oligonucleotides as drugs. So this is tutorial 13, optimizing access products. Basically, we'll be talking about prodrugs in this course, in this week. Now, we will start with some of the questions. So first question is, which of the following statements is false with respect to the NMR screening detect drug target interaction? The procedure relies on small molecules having shorter relaxation time than large molecules. The procedure can be used on mixture of compounds. The method can detect weak binding. The method can identify small molecules binding to different regions of the same binding site. So which one of do you think is the statement which is false with respect to the NMR screening when you're talking about detecting the drug target interaction? So what do you think will be the false statement among these four? Okay, so the correct answer is the processor relies on small molecules, drugs having shorter relaxation time than the large molecule that are targets. So the false statement is the processor relies on the small molecules. So why is this the false statement? So if you are talking about the NMR screening, small molecules like ligands typically have longer relaxation time compared to the large molecules. And when a small molecule binds to a large target, such as a protein, its relaxation time decreases due to slower molecular tumbling and increased interactions. So this principle is used in techniques like saturation transfer difference and ligand observed NMR to study their target interactions. So I hope it is clear to all of you. This NMR screening actually works on the small molecule like ligands actually have longer relaxation time compared to the target molecule. And when you are talking about a small molecule bind to a target, its relaxation time is now going to be decreased because of the increased interaction with that particular target. So that is why now the relaxation time decreases. So this procedure actually relies on uh, the techniques like saturation transfer difference and ligand observed NMR to study the drug target interactions. I hope this is clear. So now we will be talking about why the other statements are not true. So the procedure can be used on mixture of compounds. So the statement was that. So it is true. Why? Because NMR actually allows for screening of compound libraries in a mixture, making it useful for fragment-based drug discovery. So you can actually do the screening of multiple compounds in a mixture, and that is why NMR is very useful in these techniques. Next statement was the method can detect weak binding. So that is also true because NMR is highly sensitive to weak interactions, detecting dissociation constants in a millimolar to micromolar range. So NMR is actually very sensitive instrument, so it will detect your weak binding also, and that is where the statement is also correct about NMR detection. Third statement was the method can identify small molecules binding to different region of the same binding site. So this is also true. Why? Because NMR can map binding site by observing chemical shift perturbation or nuclear overhauser effect, that is NY interactions, revealing different region of interaction. So that this is how they will identify where on which different region the molecule is binding to the binding site. So just if you are finding it complex, so just break it down into the simpler terms. Imagine this as a key and a lock. So think of a drug or small molecule as a key, okay, and target protein, the molecule in the body it interacts with as a lock. So as we have already learned in the lock and key model that every enzyme has a particular binding site, and that is considered to be a lock, and a particular receptor can get the binding site, can block the binding site having the similar kind of shape of the active site, right? So if an enzyme has a particular shape of the active site, so the key, so the molecule which has to be binding with that should have a similar structure, binding structure as that of active site of the drug molecule, right? So that is how we have learned about the key and lock model of that enzyme system, enzyme catalysis. So now similarly, think of a drug molecule as a key and the target protein where it has to bind as a lock. So to treat a disease, scientists need to find the right key that fits into the right lock. So basically, you have to find a right drug which corresponds to right target. How does NMR help now? So nuclear magnetic resonance, the NMR, is a superpower microscope that lets scientists listen to how molecules behave in a solution. So step by step, how NMR detects drug-target interactions. So we will be talking about this. So first step is start with the small key, drugs alone. So when we took look at just the small molecule, drug molecule, they move freely in solution, spinning and tumbling very fast. Right? In NMR, these molecules give clear and sharp signal like a unique radio frequency for each key. So when you are talking about a small molecules, small drugs, so they move very freely in the solution. So moving is freely means they are spinning very fast and tumbling in the solution. So because of that spinning and tumbling, these molecules are giving a clear sharp signal in the NMR spectrum. And that is how you will see that how when the molecule is alone in the system, how it is going to react, right? So if it is alone, it is reacting like this. It is spinning and tumbling fast, and now they are giving you a particular NMR spectrum, which is corresponding to the free drug, right? So now introduce the lock. So next point is introduction of the lock. That is the target protein. So where the drug has to bind, that target protein you introduce in the system. So now what happened? Now scientists add the target protein to the solution and watch how the drug molecule behave. So initially what you do, you have kept the drug alone in the system, in the solution, and you study how it behaved, right? Now you have added a target protein, which is the lock here. So if you are considering that the key and lock system, that key is a drug and lock is the target protein. So if you are adding in the same solution the target protein, and now you have to see how the drug molecule will behave. This is the second point. Now third, check for changes in drug behavior. So now you will check how the drug will behave in target protein uh, around the target protein. Now because you have added that particular lock in this key. So now you have to see how the key behaves. So if a drug binds to the target, it slows down because the big protein is much heavier. Now the free drug was spinning fast, tumbling fast, but now if it is binding to that target, that is a big protein system, it slows down, right? Because of the heavy protein system. This binding changes the way the drug atom resonate, vibrate in NMR, right? So initially, if it was spinning very fast, it is giving some kind of spectrum, but when it binds to that particular target protein, now the spinning and the movement will change, right? Because of the big protein, which is heavier. So this binding changes the way drug atom resonate. So how it is resonating earlier will get changed because of the drug target molecule, right? Hope it is clear to all of you whatever I am teaching. Any doubt is there, please tell me. So there is a change in the resonance vibration in the NMR because of this binding. And if there is no binding, the small molecule remains unchanged. So you will see through NMR how the change in spectrum of of the free drug molecule and the binded drug molecule with the target changes, right? How there is a change in both of them. If there is no binding, then the NMR spectra will remain same, the molecule remain unchanged, and the molecule remain free. But if the drug binding happens, then there is a significant change in the uh, resonate structure and vibration of that molecule in the NMR, which is C. So the fourth point is what this tells us. So now, if the binding is happening, the molecule is slowing down, the molecule is not vibrating fast, it's not spinning fast in the NMR. So now what do you understand by this? So if a drug binds well, its signal in NMR shifts, disappears or broadens. If that drug doesn't bind, its signal stays the same. So this helps scientists identify promising drug candidate without needing to label or modify the molecules. Right. This is how NMR spectroscopy will come handy in terms of identifying a promising drug target by the scientists. So if the binding happens, it changes the signal in the NMR. Maybe the signal get broadened, it get disappear sometimes. NMR spectra will shift, right? But if it doesn't bind with the drug molecule, if it doesn't target the target protein, the signals remain same as when the drug was free in the solution. So this actually helps quite a well to scientists to identify the promising drug candidate. So I hope it is clear to all of you how NMR is actually playing a very important role in drug discovery. So now why is NMR useful? So seeing all these behavior, all these things, now what we say that why is NMR useful? So this NMR spectroscopy can test many drugs at once, screening drug mixtures. First of all, this is the major point. And then it can detect even weak interactions, important for finding early drug leads. It can map exactly where the drug binds on the protein. So analogy wrap up, imagine if you have a bunch of keys and you don't know which one fits your door. If a key fits and turns, it binds. NMR signal changes. If it doesn't fit, no change in the signal. If a key partially fits, scientists can tweak it to make a better version. So this is how NMR is useful in drug discovery. I hope it is clear to all of you. If anyone has any doubt, please feel free to ask. Understand this, digest this, take your time. Okay, I hope it is clear to all of you. If no one has any doubt, we'll move forward. So the next question is, what is the term used for an animal that has been genetically modified for in vivo test? Chimeric animal, transformed animal, hybrid animal, or transgenic animal? So what is the question asking? Which is a term that will be used for an animal that has been genetically modified for in vivo test. So in the last class we have learned about the in vivo, in vitro, in silico, right? Three terms we have discussed and have seen some questions over it. So I hope you have remembered that. So in vivo test, if an animal gets genetically modified in vivo test, what would you call that? Chimeric animal, transformed animal, hybrid animal, or transgenic animal? So what do you think will be the right answer? So first of all, we will be discussing about the four things, that is chimeric animal, transgenic animal, hybrid animal, or transformed animal. Okay. So first of all, we will be discussing that, and after that, we will answer the question. So one by one, we will be understanding these concepts. Okay. So let's start. So first of all, the thing is chimeric animal. So what do you mean by a chimeric animal? A chimera is an organism that contains cells from two or more genetically distinct sources. The different cell population originate from different zygotes, for example, fusion of embryos or transplantation of cells. For example, a mouse generated by injecting embryonic stem cell from one stem into the blastocyst of another stem. Okay. That means an organism that contains cells from two or more genetically distinct sources. So if you are injecting something in the mouse, in the animal, that is from two different sources, that that animal is known as chimeric animal. So after injecting it, the mouse will be called as chimeric mouse, chimeric animal. Okay. Then comes transgenic animal. So a transgenic animal has a foreign gene, transgene, as the name suggests. So introduced into the genome via genetic engineering. Okay. So the foreign gene is stably integrated into its DNA and is inherited by offspring. Okay. So understand that thing, that it is a animal having a foreign gene, a trans gene, right? Which is introduced into genome through our genetic engineering. And that particular genome is stably integrated to the DNA. It is going to the DNA and is inherited by offspring. So it is inherited. So, for example, a mouse expressing green fluorescent protein (GFP) due to the insertion of a jellyfish gene. Okay, if you are inserting a jellyfish gene into a mouse, a transgene, a foreign gene you are inserting into the mouse, and it is expressing a green fluorescent protein, then that is known as a transgenic animal. Okay. Now the third one is hybrid animal. So a hybrid is the offspring of two different species or subspecies that have mated. So hybrid animal is the result when two different species or subspecies have mated with each other. So it results from the natural or artificial crossbreeding of genetically distinct individuals. Right. So a hybrid is the offspring when two different species is mating with each other. Okay. So the results come from the natural or artificial crossbreeding. For example, a mule, a cross between a donkey and a horse. When a donkey and horse are mated with each other, a mule is what is generated. Or a liger, when lion and tiger have mated with each other. So these are known as hybrid animals. Now coming to the fourth thing, that is the transformed animal. So this term is less commonly used in animals compared to bacteria or cell cultures. A transformed animal typically refers to an animal in which cells have undergone genetic modification, often through viral or plasmid mediated gene transfer. It can refer to cells that have been altered to gain new traits. Right? For example, cells in a transgenic mouse transformed using a viral vector to express a certain gene. So the key difference in between these four are: chimeric is a mixture of cells from different genetic sources in the same organism. If you are injecting different cells from different genetic sources into us organism. Transgenic is a genetically engineered animal with a foreign gene stably integrated. Hybrid animal is a crossbreed between two different species. And transformed animal is an animal or its cells that have undergone genetic modification, usually temporary. It is not inherited to the offsprings. So the term used for an animal that has been genetically modified is transgenic animal. So we have seen those things. So now we can answer the question that if it is genetically modified, then transgenic animal is the term which we call. So why? Because genetic modification. Transgenic animals have had foreign genes, that is transgenes, inserting into their genome using genetic engineering techniques like microinjection, viral vectors, or CRISPR-Cas9. Stable integration. Now, if you have injected that particular gene to the genome, now it is stable. It is introduced into the animal's DNA and is passed on to its offspring. So it is not temporary, it is actually permanent kind of thing. If you have injected something, now the animal has that DNA introduced with that particular gene, and now it will be transmitted to its offsprings as well. So in vivo testing, these animals are used to study gene function, disease models, and a drug testing in a living organism. This is how your transgenic animals are. So examples for transgenic animals used for in vivo test are knockout mice. So mice where a specific gene is deleted to study diseases like cancer or neurodegenerative disorders. Humanized mice, mice engineered to express human genes for biomedical research. Glowfish, fluorescent fish that is modified with jellyfish genes to study environmental toxicity. So these are some animals, transgenic animals, which are used for in vivo testing. Okay, so I hope it is clear how this hybrid, transgenic, and chimeric and transformed animals are different from each other. If someone has doubt in these four things, please ask or raise your hand. So now coming to the next question. So what is meant by a lead compound in medicinal chemistry? So this lead compound we have talked previously also. So what is that and how we identify a lead compound? What is the purpose? So we have taken those questions previously as well. So I hope you have seen those videos. So now if someone hasn't understand that, so we can take the thing here also. So the question is, what do you mean by the lead compound? So the first answer is a drug containing the element lead. Second option, a leading drug in a particular area of medicine. A compound that acts as the starting point for drug design and development. Or a drug which is normally the first to be prescribed for a particular ailment. So, what do you think is a lead compound? Anyone? So, the right answer is a compound that acts as the starting point for the drug design and development. So, lead compound is a compound which may be having some of the bioactivity which is the desired one, and that compound actually act as a starting point for drug design and development. So, next question: drugs that are taken orally pass directly to the liver once they enter the blood supply. This is known as the first pass effect. True or false? So we have also discussed about this first pass effect and how your intravenous injection IVs bypass this first pass effect, and when you are taking a medicine orally, how it is not bypassing your first pass effect. So we have studied that. So the question is asking drugs that are taken orally pass directly to the liver, and once they have entered the blood supply. So this is known as the first pass effect, or true or false. So any answer is a very straightforward question. Think about it. We have discussed those questions. So the right answer is true because this is known as first pass effect. So if you are taking a medicine orally, it is actually when it is entering to your bloodstream. So once it is entering to the bloodstream, it will pass to the liver, and this is known as first pass effect. So oral medicine doesn't bypass this effect, but if you are taking injections, IV injections, then it is bypassing this effect. Okay, you don't have to. The medicine don't have to go through the liver. So I hope it is clear to all of you whatever we have discussed so far. So coming to the next question, which of the following routes of administration is the fastest way to deliver a drug into bloodstream? So we have discussed this thing multiple times now. So first option is intramuscular route, second is intravenous, third is intrathecal route, fourth is oral route. So which of the following routes is the fastest way to deliver a drug into the bloodstream? What do you think? Okay, so the right answer is IV injections. So we have discussed that how these injections are given, and there is intramuscular, intravenous, intraethical, and oral. So this we have discussed in detail in the previous lecture. So I'm not going to into the details. Just telling you that intravenous route is the fastest way. Why? Because it actually surpasses your bypasses your first pass effect, and also it is given directly into your veins and will directly enter into your bloodstream. So it is way fast than your oral route or any other route. Okay. Coming to the next question, primary and secondary amines act as both hydrogen bond donor and acceptor, whereas tertiary amines are only hydrogen bond acceptor. So is it true or false? So for simplicity, I have drawn this primary, secondary, and tertiary structures. In primary amine, there is only one carbon which is connected to this amine. In secondary amine, there are two carbon molecules which are connected, and in tertiary amine, there are three carbon centers which are connected to the nitrogen. So they are saying that primary one is acting as hydrogen bond donor and acceptor. So it will either donate or it will either accept. How it is accepting and donating? So it is donating through nitrogen, is accepting through hydrogen, right? So what do you think will be the right answer? So in primary amine, so I'll repeat, this primary amine is acting both in hydrogen bond donor and acceptor. Why? Because it is it is basically accepting the hydrogen bond through the nitrogen, and it is donating through hydrogen, right? So nitrogen is uh, making hydrogen bond with other hydrogen, and this hydrogen is making the hydrogen bond with another nitrogen. So it will act as both hydrogen bond donor as well as acceptor. And when you think about the secondary amine, so what happens here? You already have a hydrogen which is free here, right? So it can either act as hydrogen bond donor through hydrogen atom, and hydrogen bond acceptor through nitrogen atom because it has lone pairs of electrons, right? Nitrogen. So this is the right thing which they are asking. But now there is a twist that whereas tertiary amines are only hydrogen bond acceptor. So now this is the structure for tertiary amine. So they are claiming that is only hydrogen bond acceptor. So nitrogen has lone pair of electrons here. It can accept the hydrogen bond, but it cannot give hydrogen bond donor. Why? Because it lacks hydrogen atom. Now there is no hydrogen atom in tertiary amine, that is why it is not participating in hydrogen bond donor. Okay, this doesn't have a hydrogen bond donor, but it surely has a hydrogen bond acceptor. Okay, because nitrogen has a lone pair of electron, it can accept hydrogen, but it cannot donate hydrogen for the hydrogen bond. Okay, so that is why the correct statement is now correct. True, false. What do you think? Is it true or false? Now it is straightforward. So yes, it is true. The statement is true. Primary and secondary amines can act as both hydrogen bond donors and acceptors, whereas tertiary amines are only hydrogen bond acceptors. So now moving to the next question. Drug selectivity towards this target is mainly due to molecular size and shape complementarity, drug color, drug boiling point, or drug melting point. So if you have gone through the key and lock mechanism which we have discussed in the previous slides, if you have understood that, you can surely answer this question very easily. So they are asking drug selectivity towards the target is mainly because of the molecular size and shape complementarity, drug color, boiling point, or drug melting point. So what do you think will be the right answer? Just think about it. Okay, so the right answer is A, that is molecular shape and size and shape complementarity. So this is the right answer. Why? Because drug molecules interact with receptor based on shape and complementarity and chemical interactions. So similarly to a lock and key or induced fit mechanism. So if your target molecule have a shape that is complementary with your drug, then only it will show some activity. Then only it will fit and show the activity. Right. I hope it is clear to all of you. Now, going to the next question. To hide the answer. Let's hide it. So, a pharmacophore is defined as entire drug molecule, set of structural features responsible for biological activity, drug metabolism product, or toxic fragment of a drug. So, what do you mean by a pharmacophore? So, what do you think will be the right answer? What is meant by the pharmacophore? So, the right answer is set of structural feature responsible for biological activity. So, why is it the right answer? So, pharmacophore represents the essential structural elements like functional groups, aromatic rings, hydrogen bond donors or acceptors necessary for interaction with the biological target. That is known as pharmacophore. So, I hope it is clear what is pharmacophore. It represents the structural elements like functional group, aromatic rings, and other things that is necessary for interaction with the biological target. So, it is a set of structural features responsible for biological activity of the drug molecule. So, that is known as a pharmacophore. That is not an entire drug molecule, but yes, uh, a, a potential set of structural features that will be responsible for the activity of the drug molecule. So I hope it is clear. Coming to the next question. What is the primary goal of structural activity relationship analysis? To determine the molecular weight of a compound, to identify how molecular structure influences biological activity, to predict the solubility of a drug, or to analyze the toxicology of a compound. So, what is the main goal of SAR analysis? So, structural activity relationship. We have talked about this in the previous classes. Okay, so when we are talking about the structural activity relationship, right? So, it is basically done to identify how molecular structure influences biological activity. So, how your molecular structure will affect the biological activity of the molecule. So, this is what you have understood in the SAR analysis. So, what is a structure activity relationship? We will brush it up some things here. Those who have already learned about this will take a recap, I'll say. So, definition is structure activity relationship is the relationship between chemical structure of a molecule and its biological activity. So, how well it works as a drug. It helps scientists understand which part of a drug molecule are important for its action and how changes in the structure affects its potency, effectiveness and safety. Structure activity relationship studies help in designing better drugs with fewer side effects. So this is how you will understand how the chemical structure of the molecule and biological activities are related. Right? What is the relationship? If you alter the structure of some of the drug, how your biological activity now is getting altered. So it helps scientists to understand which part is essential, which part is giving the biological activity, which part is like important for the potency, effectiveness, and safety of that drug. Right. So this is how you will understand by doing this type of structure activity relationship. So you will it will help in designing the better drugs with fewer side effects. So why is SAR important? So it helps in drug discovery by identifying which chemical modification improve a drug's function. It allows medicinal chemists to find tuned drug molecules to make them more effective. And it also helps reducing the toxicity and unwanted side effects. It saves time and money by predicting which modification will look before making the actual drug. Okay, so that is why SAR is very important. So if you have to understand which part of the drug molecule, which structure is working well for your like for your desired target, you have to understand the structure activity relationship. So how the structure of that compound is participating, providing basically the activity of that drug. I hope it is clear to all of you what is meant by SAR, structure activity relationship. So now we will understand here how it is working. So these are some slides which I have actually put so that you will understand the structure activity relationship better. So first of all the question comes, how does SAR work? So how you are going to do a structure activity relationship on a drug molecule? So this is a layman's explanation. Imagine a lock and key model. So you'll say that every time something comes up, you will talk about the lock and keys. Yeah, in your system, it is working like that. In body, it is working like that. So the drug, that is the key, must fit perfectly into the target. That is the lock. Usually a protein in the body to work, right? So if the key is too big or has extra parts, it may not fit well. But if it is too small or missing part, it won't work well. So basically, if it is big and have extra parts, it doesn't fit at all. But if it is small and have some missing parts, it won't work well. So structure active relationship helps scientists figure out which part of the key is important and which can be changed without breaking the function. So what is important and how you can alter it without changing or breaking the function of that molecule. So what are the steps that are involved in SAR analysis? So first step is identify the active part. So we have learned about this pharmacophore now. So here this pharmacophore is the active part, which is the which is responsible for the biological activity of the drug. This part is only responsible for the biological activity which the drugs provide. Okay. So first of all, you have to identify that active part to do the analysis. So the pharmacophore is a part of the drug that interacts with the biological target. So this is only the part which is having essential biological groups, functional groups, hydrogen bond donors and acceptor embedded, and which interact with your target molecule, right? So that is the pharmacophore for it. So for example, in aspirin, the acetyl group is important for its pain relieving effect, right? So in aspirin, this acetyl group is behaving as a pharmacophore because this is the only group which is interacting with your target species and is biologically interacting with your target, forms the uh, what will you say that interactions, binding interactions that will induce a pain relieving effect. So first of all, you have to identify that particular part known as pharmacophore. Then the second point is modify the structure. So once you have identified the active part, so now you will modify that particular structure. Chemical change will happen. So small changes like adding, removing atoms or groups are made to see how they affect the drug action. For example, changing a hydroxyl group to a methyl group might increase or decrease the activity. So first of all, you have to check how, if you are improving or if you are modifying the structure of the compound, how it will affect the drug's activity. So is the activity is getting now increased or decreased based on your changes which you have made? You will identify that either you have to make that change or you have to eliminate that change. So some changes might increase the activity, but some changes might decrease the activity as well. So you have to think about it. You have to be very sure that if you are making some change, it should be beneficial, right? So if it is decreasing the activity, you will not alter the chemical structure in that way, I'll say. So modify the structure, small changes, you will see the effect of the drug's action. Third one is test the new versions. Sorry. So test the new versions. What do you mean by that now? Each modified molecule is tested to see how well it works compared to the original one. For example, scientists test if the modified aspirin still relieves the pain effectively. So, if you have come up with a new version, you have to test it. So, if you have, after modifying the structure of a molecule of a drug, if you see that there is an increase in activity, so now you have to test that version. So each modified molecule is tested to see how well it works compared to the original. So it should have a greater activity as compared to the original one. For example, scientists test if the modified aspirin still relieves the pain effectively. Now, after testing it, the fourth and the last point is compare the results. So you have to compare the results of the altered drug and the original drug which was available. So if a change makes the drug better, that's good. That is a good modification. But if a change make it worse or causes side effects, then scientists avoid that modification. So as I told you that if you modify structure, and you will see that there is a decrease in activity. So what you will do? You will not change the structure like that, right? Because the main motivation is to increase the activity, to reduce the side effects, to reduce the toxicity. That is how you have made a drug. You don't make a drug if you this is the change will introduce toxicity or decrease the activity or improve the side effects. You don't add those things in your drug, right? So I hope I am clear to all of you. So if a change make the drug better, then it is a good modification. And if it doesn't, if the change make it worse or causes the side effect, then scientists avoid that particular change. They would not modify the drug like that. So I hope it is clear to all of you. So now we will be taking here some of the medicines and how they participate in structure activity relationship. So first of all, just tell me whatever I have taken in this particular slides and also till so far. So you understood or not? If anything is not clear, please tell me. Yes, if everyone has understood everything, then we'll move forward. So, when you talk about this penicillin, it is a well-known antibiotic. So, the beta-lactam, this is the penicillin structure. So, the beta-lactam ring is essential for its antibacterial activity. So, this is the beta-lactam ring, which is essential for the activity of penicillin, that is antibiotic activity. So, scientists modify penicillin to create amoxicillin, which is more effective and stable. So, this is the structure of amoxicillin. So previously, the structure was this penicillin, and they have known that this particular lactam ring is responsible for the activity, so they don't have to remove it. So they don't remove that particular lactam ring, and they build on that. They change this ester moiety, sorry, this ether moiety to this particular uh, ketone moiety, right? So they found that it is more effective and it is more stable. So that is how they have improved the penicillin antibiotic by changing it to amoxicillin, which is again an antibiotic, but it is more effective and stable. So if you come to this aspirin, this is a painkiller as well as the blood thinner. So the acetyl group, as we have talked about, that it is the acetyl group which is the pharmacophore, which basically biologically bind to the target molecule. So structure activity relationship studies found that development of ibuprofen and paracetamol with different effect. So if you change, if the SAR studies led to development of ibuprofen and paracetamol with different effect. So if you change the acetyl, if you somehow change the structure of this aspirin, you will end up having this ibuprofen and paracetamol, which will actually show some different effect. So if you see here, so this is the basically the structure activity relationship, how they are going to change it. So aspirin, the modified version or development is ibuprofen and paracetamol. Beta blockers, that is heart medications. The structure activity relationship study helped improve drugs like propranolol by modifying chemical groups to improve heart rate control. So now, structure activity relationship lead to help in improving the drugs like propranolol, which is a heart medication, that is a beta blocker, to improve the heart rate control. So when you see here the structure activity relationship of this compound, amide and carboxylic acid are involved in binding. So what conclusion is there after you are doing the analysis? That this amide and this carboxylic group and this amide group is responsible, involved in binding. Carboxylic acid binds as the carboxylate ion, this carboxylate ion, Mechanism of action involves beta lactam ring. So this is a beta lactam ring which shows the mechanism of action. Then activity related to beta lactam ring strain subject to stability factors. Bicyclic system increases the beta lactam ring strain. So bicyclic system is increasing the strain. Not much variation in structure is possible. Variations are limited to the side chain. So you can only change the side chain when you are talking about this penicillin and amoxicillin. So these beta lactam rings are strained and this bicyclic compound is strained and it increases the strain. Basically, the bicyclic system is increasing the strain of that beta lactam ring. So there is no much variation you can think of. You only can modify the side chain, nothing else. Everything else will be constant because of the strain, because of the activity, because of the things they are participating. So you cannot change the other things. You only can alter the side chain. So variations are limited to the side chain only. So this is what they have concluded when they done the structure activity relationship of the penicillin molecule. So they have developed uh, another thing that is amoxicillin and they have uh, concluded these things. How the amide and carboxylate group are participating in binding, how other functional group, how they are contributing in biological activity. So I hope this much is clear to all of you. So key takeaways are that structure activity relationship help design better drugs by understanding how chemical structure affect the function. Small changes in a molecule can make drugs stronger, weaker, or safer. So real world impact is many life-saving drugs like penicillin, aspirin, beta blockers were involved improved using SAR. So this SAR study actually helps in improving the drugs like penicillin, aspirin, and beta blockers. So this is why the structure-activity relationship is very important when you are designing a drug or when you are seeing how the chemical structure is affecting the biological activity. This is very useful in that. So I hope it's clear to all of you. So now I'm just stopping the lecture, this tutorial today. We'll take up the rest of the questions in the next class. I hope it is clear to all of you, whatever I have taught you till now. And please make sure that you attend all the lectures, all the tutorials, so that we will be on the same page and there is no ambiguity, there is no confusion, there is no other things. Uh, so, thank you so much for attending. Thank you so much for listening and understanding the things. So, I'll stop in the tutorial today. Thank you so much.